Hello everybody and welcome to Omnipoke, the channel that brings you guys everything Pokemon. I'm Jack and today we're going to be taking a look at Eternatus in the post-rotation format. Eternatus looks to be one of the more interesting counters for Calyrex. We've already profiled another Dark deck, Umbreon, on the channel. And I think there is a real reason to play Umbreon over Eternatus, but Eternatus still looks to be one of the most aggressive decks in the format, and having a great Calyrex matchup I think will be important going forward. Obviously, Rapid Strike is a bit of a worry, but regardless, I still think Eternatus can boast a pretty scary engine as well as game plan in most scenarios. So yeah, still definitely worth looking into. First things first though, make sure you check out the Potown store where you can get a 5% discount on your order using code Omnipoke. Make sure you keep an eye out for Evolving Skies coming soon as well. The set is released at the end of this week, so they will indeed have some codes for Evolving Skies up by the end of the week, I believe. So make sure you head over there to grab your Evolving Skies codes nice and early. So everyone knows what the basic concept is, but for anyone that doesn't, Eternatus basically looks to just be applying pressure with Dread End for 270 for 2 energy as early as possible. Still has an excellent engine and doesn't really lose much to rotation, to be honest. Can still boast the 4 Crobats. It can never play things like the Dedenne anyway, so hasn't really lost any consistency pieces too much. It loses Com, but that's not the biggest deal. Because we can still play Evo Incense, which is good. Moltres actually helps avoid the sort of lose to turn 2 boss problem that the format seems to have a little bit. If you go second, you can sometimes lose to turn 2 boss because your opponent can just boss up your energy. But Moltres, as well as just Power Accelerator on Eternatus V itself, can still be really good for preventing that, because you can still get an extra attachment ready to go turn 2. And the typing is great. Rapid Strike looks scarier than ever, but Shadow Rider I think is actually cementing itself in my head as one of the better decks post-rotation for sure. So having a good Shadow Rider matchup is going to be great, especially as a lot of the Shadow Rider lists right now are playing Alcremie rather than the Galarian Zapdos and Aurora package, and I think that matchup is slightly easier with the Alcremie than it is with the Zapdos. So, onto the Pokemon. We're running the full 4-4, the full suite of Eternatus V and VMAX. As I mentioned, we've got Power Accelerator on the V to be able to help us get an extra attachment, as well as soften up some of these Pokemon that either we can't quite get enough Pokemon to one shot with Dread End turn 2, or just start to apply some pressure for when they are VMAXs, so we can maybe get there a little bit easier. And then obviously Eternatus VMAX with the Eternal Zone ability, letting you have up to 8 Dark Pokemon on your bench, and then Dread End doing 30 for each of your Dark Pokemon in play. So you can kind of see what we're doing here. We've got the 4 Crobat. Dark Asset is still just as good as ever, and Eternatus has always been able to boast a pretty consistent engine because it naturally gets to play 4 of this card. Obviously not as strong as something like a Dedenne anyway, but still having a high count of Crobats is always going to be good, helping you just draw into them easier. And obviously they're your damage acceleration as well. Galarian Moltres has the Dire Flame Wings ability. We've seen a lot of Eternatus Moltres recently, and we still think it's one of the best ways to play it. Being able to attach an extra energy to be able to either E-switch onto the Eternatus, or just having an extra attacker, one that is very good at dealing with Galarian Zapdos as well, is great. Just because you're weak to grass rather than fighting, so you can survive a Zapdos hit is really important. We've got 1 Liepard V. I think the Toughness Cape as well as Air Balloons are going to be very, very key pieces in this format. So being able to have a searchable Tool Scrapper that's also a plus 30 damage is really important. You could just play Tool Scrapper, of course, but I think being able to lump it into a Pokemon is really nice. And yeah, I think, like I say, I think things like the Aurora Box, sort of Suicune, as well as Zacian Zamazenta, are all going to be playing things like Toughness Cape. So it's going to be important to get rid of those. And then we've also got 2 Hoopa. Assault Gate is really nice, being able to move the energy around because we have E-switches, means that it's not really a wasted attachment on Hoopa anymore. We can't really feast on Jirachis and stuff anymore because they're all rotating, but we can still take early prizes on things like Sobble, which is great. This is also good damage to set up for Dread End to be able to KO VMAXs as well. So yeah, Hoopa's just a really efficient attacker, to be honest, and it's not a nice 1 prize out as well, just to kind of skew the prize trade here and there. Trainers wise, Pretty simple, to be honest. We've got the 4 Quick Ball and the 4 Great Ball, as well as the 2 Evo Incense, just to be nice and consistent. We definitely could bump up the Evo Incense if you're feeling like you want to be searching for the VMAX a bit more. Now we don't have Calm, it can sometimes be a little bit more difficult, so pretty happy to see just a swap between 3 Great Ball and 3 Evo Incense. But I really like Great Ball, to be honest, just to be able to find lots of Pokemon in the early turns. Finding basics in the early turns I think is going to be really important. For Switch, I think it's more important than ever to be able to just switch around. Now we don't have Yveltal to have free retreat. It's going to be really important to be able to move around. When we get to the energy, we'll see that we're actually not playing Hiding Dark, but you can also play Hiding Darks and maybe drop down the Switch to 3 or even a 2 count if you want to, just so, because you'll have pivots in the form of Hiding Darks anyway. But yeah, the loss of Yveltal is kind of annoying, so that's why we've bumped up the Switch counts a little bit. 3 E-Switch, as I mentioned, 1 combos really well with Galarian Moltres, just be able to make a Eternatus come out of nowhere and just be hitting 270 from nothing is really important, as well as, like I say, being able to protect energy here and there, being able to move energy off from power accelerators or assault gates, anything like that is going to be very nice. And for Crushing Hammer, Eternatus has played Crushing Hammer in the past, and to be honest, I don't see any reason why it can't now. You could rip out these Crushing Hammers for some more consistency, for another incense, for maybe some of those Hiding Darks, some tools, some stadiums perhaps. At the moment we're not playing any counter stadium to Path of the Peak, which could be a bit of an issue. We'll get to some other options for the stadium later on, but yeah, you definitely could just sort of play Evo Incense and then play a 3rd Evo Incense and then play like 3 Training Court or something. Unfortunately, there's no great stadium for Eternatus. That's why we have omitted them in the list, and we just kind of have to say Path of the Peak is going to be getting us. But even with a Path of the Peak in play, Eternatus is still 2-shotting every VMAX in the game, so it's not actually the biggest deal. But yeah, you may want to just strip back the hammers and instead play some stadiums. Hammers in general, though, kind of are one of the only comeback cards in the post-rotation format, which is annoying because hammers aren't the nicest way of being able to get back into a game. But again, kind of on that lines of if you miss your energy attachment or if you're 1 energy behind, you're very much behind in the game. Hammers can force you into that position, which is sometimes what you need to be able to stay in the game. So yeah, it's an unfortunate side effect of having the way the format is, but hammers may be necessary in the list. But yeah, if you're not keen on the hammers, you can definitely play some stadiums. I think Training Court is probably off the top of my head the best one to be able to counter Path the Peak if you're worried about that. Supporters, super simple: 4 research, 4 Marnie, 3 boss. We just want to be as consistent as possible. No room for techs here. You can play things like Birdkeeper and Phoebe. I'll get to those momentarily. But yeah, I've just gone for the super consistent 4 research, 4 Marnie, 4 boss for now. Or sorry, 3 boss for now. And then energy, we have 9 darks, primarily to be able to 1, always be proccing Power Accelerator, 2, getting them into the discard in general, with things like Quick Ball to be able to use the Moltres ability, and 3, just making sure you guarantee that turn 1 energy attachment is really important. On top of that, we've also got 2 capture energy, so we're running quite a high energy count in this list, but capture is very, very strong post-rotation. The fact it lets you search out another Pokemon is great. It's basically 2 extra Quick Balls. It also fulfills the attack cost for Power Accelerator, so you can still use the capture turn 1 to find an extra Pokemon and attach a Dark to a benched Eternatus. So you don't need a Dark Energy to be able to use Power Accelerator, which is great. So yeah, it just seems like a very, very good choice. Like I say, a bit of a higher energy count than some lists out there, but I think energy is just the most important thing for Eternatus these days. You just need to hit your turn 1 and turn 2 attachments. So this is the full list. Feel free to pause and take a quick snapshot of the list in all its glory. Tech-wise, Galarian Zigzagoon is definitely a viable tech again. It can, especially in combination with 270 plus 30 from the Eternatus, you can push into one-shots with a couple of Zigzagoon pings. I personally am still kind of on the Hoopa train, but I think Hoopa is definitely very, very personal preference, and you could just play Galarian Zigzagoons instead to kind of have that damage here and there in that fashion instead. Like I said, Training Court is one potential stadium you could play in terms of trying to counterpath the peak. It's not particularly nice, but it at least does get your energy back, and like I say, energy is really important. You can maybe even eat into one of the energy slots if you're playing a Training Court, but I wouldn't want to eat into more than one, I don't think. But yeah, if you're particularly worried about Path to the Peak, I think Training Court is definitely the best one to be using. Unless you're playing the Umbreon package, you can obviously build this deck pretty much completely differently and play it with Umbreon and focus on Dark Signal instead. If you're going down that route, you can play Tower of Darkness, which lets you discard extra Umbreon pieces to be able to help you draw through the deck. We will be profiling Eternatus Umbreon pretty early on into the PTCGO region or release of the cards. So yeah, that will be one of the earlier ones we profile, so you'll have a bit of an idea as to how the list changes for that. But yeah, you definitely can go down that route with the list. As well as Phoebe Palpad. Obviously, things like Zamazenta and Decidueye look to be quite annoying, as well as Glaceon. I think one Phoebe, one Palpad can hopefully do enough, because we play the Moltres package as well as some Hoopas. I think one Phoebe, one Palpad should be enough for things like Zamazenta and Glaceon. I think you're still going to run into a bit of trouble if Decidueye can get a lot of Decidueye out, because you still only have 2 Phoebe effects, and if they can get 3 out, you can't really get through them without going like double Hooper or whatever. But if they can't, if you can pressure them down, then it may still be good enough for that matchup as well. But yeah, it's definitely worth considering. It's been played in the past in Eternatus, and I still think it's worth sort of thinking about, even if it's not not how I've built it today. I think it's definitely fairly easy slots you can put in. Matchups wise, obviously Rapid Strike is a bit iffy. You're still weak to fighting, and Rapid Strike still seems as consistent as ever. So I think Rapid Strike realistically is going to be one of the hardest matchups. Definitely winnable, but it's going to be an uphill battle no matter what. And also from our testing, without Palpad plus Phoebe, Glaceon is very, very difficult. It's not unwinnable, but you really do have to run pretty hot. You have to find double Moltres fairly early, and you have to be able to apply pressure with Hoopa fairly early. You can oftentimes sort of go through 2 prizes if they're unable to evolve one of their Glaceon on the bench, so you can just have to go through 1 Glaceon. But if they can ever get 2 Glaceons down, realistically they shouldn't be putting 6 prizes down outside of the 2 Glaceons, so you're going to have to go through 2 Glaceons. And I think without Phoebe Palpad, you probably can't do that. With Phoebe Palpad, I think it's definitely possible, but with the current 60 I've showed off today, I think Glaceon is also going to be a bit of an uphill battle. Everything else, I think it's definitely winnable. Shadow Rider Calyrex is obviously great. The Ice Rider, Victini, and Leafeon matchups, I think are all winnable. I think they are heavily, you're more favoured going first, of course, but you know, with the hammers we can sometimes disrupt them a little bit, and sometimes, you know, push ourselves into gaining that advantage. So there are ways we can do that. And then yeah, Ray and Zacian I think still are winnable. I think Zacian can be a little bit sketchy depending on how much pressure they can put on, but I think the 2 scariest matchups are Urshi and Glaceon. So Eternatus can still definitely apply pressure, and I think it's going to be one of the more consistent decks out there, because it gets to play a high-ish ball count, a fairly standard supporter count, and then 4 Crobat, which most decks can't play, so that's good. It doesn't get to play anything like the Inteleon engine, which isn't ideal, but still, I still think it's one of the more consistent decks out there. Obviously, there are some awkward losses with things like Yveltal and Com, but it could be a lot worse. I think Umbreon is also a very, very valid partner, as I mentioned, and like I say, we will be profiling that fairly soon when the cards are out on PTCGO. But basically, this is the more passive build. The Umbreon build is the more aggressive build, just trying to really capitalize on the turn 2 aggression and trying to close the game out quickly. Whereas this, I feel like, can hold out a little bit more, but really can't punish people without high rolling into a lot of Pokemon to be able to boss turn 2. A lot of the time, you're still going to have to use draw supporters on turn 2 to be able to start attacking. Whereas the benefits of the Umbreon build are that you can do that and then pop an Umbreon down to boss up whatever your opponent's doing and sort of take the initiative in the matchup. So yeah, this is definitely a lot more passive, but I think it has a little bit more sustainability. But the Umbreon build can be a bit more aggressive. So yeah, pros and cons to both. Like I say, we'll be profiling the Umbreon build in the not too distant future. But yeah, other than that, thank you very much for watching. I've been Jack from Omnipoke, and I look forward to seeing you guys in another video. Cheers, everyone.